me a great honor to introduce the event's first keynote speaker, Mr. Philippe Schaus. Everyone knows he's the CEO of Moet Hennessy, and his bio leading up to his current responsibilities reads like an A-list of the most pedigreed companies in their field. You know, INSEAD onto JP Morgan, Boston Consulting Group, Villeroy & Bosch, Louis Vuitton. Very impressive background and very interesting to bring that multiplicity of views to this conversation and to the wine world. But for the last 3 years since he's been at Moet Hennessy, Mr. Schaus has led its diverse group of companies from strength to strength, leaving most of the other big wine groups in the dust, but not content with these commercial successes, he has also added yet another feather to his cap. He has brought about a sea change in the environmental focus of Moet Hennessy, creating a truly innovative sustainability program and soon to be institute called Living Soils, which we've had a sneak preview of in Paris, at Wine Paris, with a mandate which is very close to my heart, and I hope we'll get to hear a lot about it today. Leading the interview is Ellen McCoy, grande dame of wine journalism, a household name for anyone following serious, dedicated wine press, the real deal. Ellen is an award-winning columnist for Bloomberg News, where she writes for their global newswire, and also she writes for Decanter magazine. She's the author of several seminal books. Many of you will have read them, including The Emperor of Wine, The Rise of Robert M. Parker Jr., and The Reign of American Taste, which garnered much international praise and has appeared in 5 foreign editions. She's also co-author of Thinking About Wine. So, Mr. Schaus, I will now leave you in Ellen's good hands.
Well, thank you, Nicole. That was, I don't know about grande dame, but certainly I appreciate that. So, Philippe, it's very, very good to see you. I haven't seen you since before the crisis that we have been in for almost 4 months. And so I'm going to start out by just saying, looking back over this period of almost 4 months, what have been the biggest challenges for a luxury wine company such as Moet Hennessy? Because you have wineries as part of Moet Hennessy that are all over the world.
Well, of course, everything happened very fast. I mean, when we were together at Vinexpo, this COVID crisis was still something very theoretical and far away, and then it went very fast up to the point where we were all suddenly confined at home and starting to learn to use Zoom. I would say the first challenge was, of course, protecting our teams, taking the right sanitary measures. So making sure people stayed at home, worked in a different way, equipping them and all that. Then the second challenge was on the land, because the land doesn't stop, the land cannot pause. We still have work to do. We had to do pruning in Champagne, we had to do an harvest in Argentina, so that had to go on. And it was very important that while some people were asked to stay at home, those who were working outside in the vineyards, they had to go and work there. And actually, I went to see them on one day in Champagne, and I was very happy to see happy faces doing that. And then the third one was on the production itself, on the bottling, and in Champagne on the disgorging, which you hope happens over a longer period of the year. We stopped basically production for between 4 and 8 weeks. Prepared then new measures on how to work with social distances, how to change the processes. I mean, they took handles off the doors and had a system where you open them with the elbow and things like that to reduce the interaction. So all that was prepared so we could start again working in the bottling and the disgorging as of probably, what was it, end of April, beginning of May. And then, of course, in that entire period, it was a question, what do we do towards helping on the sanitary side, and almost each one of our maisons had some activities, either producing alcoholic fluids for disinfection. That was a case, for instance, for Belvedere and partially in Cognac, or making some of our infrastructure available for hospitals, like in Champagne. You know, we have these places where we lodge the workers for the hours, and we make them available for the hospital teams in Champagne. And then we also had some funding and subsidies going to different institutions around health, around the hospitals. And then lately we launched with Hennessy an initiative which is called Unfinished Business, and which has a budget of at initially 3 million, which we're beefing up right now in the US, to help particular African American, Hispanic, and Asian small businesses in the world of wine and spirit, but also outside, who have come under severe stress with non-repayable loans. So that was also part of a gesture of help towards that. So there was a social side. And then lastly, of course, as we were all in confinement and as we could not go and visit our customers, we tried to or the teams tried to create happenings around our products. For instance, through online consumer masterclasses, with chefs and bartenders, or sessions with chefs, where kind of food pairing and preparing and allowing consumers to follow the preparation of a certain dish with food pairing. Or in China, they had a lot of creative ideas about bringing the bars, the nightlife scene into people's home and allowing them to order the corresponding drinks to their homes as they were watching what was happening in an empty nightlife place. So there were a lot of these creative ideas to kind of keep being energetic, to keep having people look at our products, talk about them, trying them out and learning about them, so that we were not just kind of falling in oblivion. And then of course the next step was the deconfinement, which here in France started in May, and that of course was again a big challenge, because we had to reorganize the offices, we had to make sure that we had only a small percentage of people in the office, and then that others were still working from home, and that is going on. Now as we speak, we are almost back to normal, at least when it comes to France and Europe, and of course in the US and Latin America, the situation is far more difficult right now.
Well, you know, you've outlined a lot of things in social and financial sustainability plans that you've put in place. But let's look forward for a minute and just talk about how the ban on travel and the closing of restaurants has really affected wine and spirits companies' financial sustainability. Looking forward to the next 18 months or so, what do you see happening for wine in retail and restaurants? And as part of that, how and when do you see tourism coming back in general? And what will Moet Hennessy be thinking about in terms of what you're planning for the whole idea of tourism?
Okay, well, a lot of questions in one. So, well, look, on the traveling, I mean, of course, it's very, very difficult to predict what's going to happen. You have several factors, of course. You have the inherent COVID situation, which we have seen evolve dramatically over the last few weeks, and places which we had thought had become COVID safe became dangerous again for people, and have been going back to confinement. In part, we just saw it in Australia, 2 days ago with a region around Melbourne in Victoria. So, and we saw it in other parts of the world. So of course the COVID situation is unpredictable, and I would assume that as long as there is not a solid vaccine in place to protect people, we will be in and out of this situation throughout the world, and we have to continue to be super careful and ask our employees to be super careful. So that's one aspect. So, and that's the most unpredictable one. And of course, that leads to government forbidding travel, or countries blocking travelers from different regions. And the European Union just gave out rules where, for instance, travelers from China or from Canada are allowed to travel into Europe, but travelers from Brazil or USA are not, depending just on the virus situation in respective countries. The second aspect is where restaurants have opened, like in China, for instance, or in Europe. There are situations where they have been opening with a lot of success. I was on the Côte d'Azur yesterday, and I talked to a couple of our partners there. They have seen good traffic in their restaurants. I mean, of course, because of the confinement rules, they don't have the full capacity. So they have to distance the tables more than usually. So they only can fill maybe 60% as many people as they could in the past. But these 60% or 70%, depending on how they're structured, they seem to be able to fill today. So there are people coming, but it's a different mix of customers. So where in Côte d'Azur, it would typically be very tourist driven. Right now, it's more locals or foreign visitors who have secondary homes around that. But then we see China, for instance, we follow very closely. And in China, what we hear is that people are still very frightened to go out big way. And so it's still, even where the capacity is there, not all the seats are taken, because people are careful, and that's also so it varies really from one region to the other, from one customer to the other. And then of course you have the sites and the visitor centers. So we have reopened all our visitor centers. They are seeing tourists coming back. Of course, it's more local tourists than international tourists. We have been supporting this by recently releasing a Louis Vuitton city guide for Reims and the Champagne region. We had that in the pipeline. We had worked on it before the COVID crisis, and it just came that it was just by chance that we brought it out now, and it actually came at the right moment to educate, in this case, French consumers or international consumers or travelers, that there's a lot to visit in Champagne, and there's a lot of history, there's a lot of incredible sightseeing, there's a lot of disruptive things to do, and on art, on local food and all that. So we have been encouraging people to go and travel again, especially where people don't travel that far anymore. And then I've been talking to airlines and airport operators about how they see the business. And they are very, very, very careful and very anxious. And they basically tell me that they don't see the level of travel, international travel, which we had last year, to come back in the next 2 years. They think will take a little bit longer, and they're of course working on it. But of course they might also be wrong on this, and maybe be too pessimistic. I think we all have tended to be a little bit too pessimistic when I look at how we are performing corresponding to with respect to our budgets, our revised forecasts rather than the budgets. We have all been a little bit too pessimistic, but that's of course the result of a lack of visibility. Now, what we do with restaurants and bars is that we try to come up with new ideas on animating, on helping them to offer by the glass offers which are interesting for them, helping them in this way on their financial performance, because of course a lot of them are struggling and have had a very, very difficult time. So whatever we can do to help them is going to be useful. And that's the case for Moet Hennessy and for anybody in this business.
Well, just following up on the issue of retail, one thing that's happened in the US, of course, is that there has been a massive increase in consumers buying wine online, and many wineries are really rushing to expand their direct-to-consumer sales. How do you see those two trends impacting Moet Hennessy and maybe other luxury wine and spirits companies?
Well, we have seen that trend, of course, and we have seen when we look at our e-commerce business, which is essentially business done through e-commerce partners, you know, like wine websites, or the e-commerce arms of department stores and supermarkets and specialty stores. When we look at all of that together, we have seen all throughout the world, and it's the case everywhere. It's the case in China, it's the case in Europe, it's the case in the US. We have seen these numbers doubling, tripling versus past. Now, what we have to see is that historically, when I compare to my colleagues at LVMH, who are in the beauty business, for instance, or in the fashion business, the percentage of turnover done in the wine business online has been historically very small. So they have far higher percentages than the ones we have. But ours have been growing. And of course, the big question will be what happens afterwards? Is this going to stay there because people got used to that? Or is it going to go retract again a bit and going back to where it was before? My assumption would be that it's probably going to be somewhere in between. There is a lot of fun to go and visit a winery. I mean, you don't just do it because you want to buy a bottle, you do it because of the experience. There is a lot of fun to go into a very nice specialty store. So people want to do that again when it feels safe to do it and when they can do it. And then some people have got used to order online. And then another online business, which I'm very curious about how it's going to evolve, is all this ordering of restaurant food online. You know, as people are in confinement, these services around food delivery have exploded. And with this, there is, of course, also a wine part going with it, or wine, spirits, beer part going with it, which is still underdeveloped. And that will be very interesting to see how that evolves. And that raises questions about size of bottles, having more small bottles in the assortment, because very often people will not want to order a full bottle. They will want to have a by the glass offer when they order from their favorite restaurants, a home delivery. Now, of course, by the glass doesn't really work, so you have to have a small bottle. We are typically poorly equipped in our offer with small formats, so we actually are better equipped with super large formats than with small ones. So these are all questions which I think we have to bear in mind and kind of observe and ask people and see whether there are some things happening there which we could all benefit from.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying about the small bottles. And I just want to quickly follow up on that and ask you whether, seeing what's going on, that has inspired the idea at Moet Hennessy of perhaps increasing the amount of wines in your portfolio, producing more small bottles of wine, more half bottles, for example, than you do now.
Yeah, you know, that was exactly the subject. Yesterday I was in Chateau d'Eslon with our partner Sacha Lichin, and who is actually doing very well in this time. So high-end rosé wine seems to have been performing or resisted particularly well in this crisis. And we were exactly discussing that: small formats, innovations, other things around using the wines in other ways. So I don't want to talk about all our innovation ideas in public for obvious reasons, but I think we all have to ask ourselves about what we can do to be more adapted to this post-COVID world.
Well, you know, one thing that I think that everyone is asking those questions if they want to survive. You know, I've been thinking a lot about your Living Soils Forum at Vinexpo Paris, and how it really made a very big statement about Moet Hennessy's commitment to environmental sustainability, and all the efforts that the company is making in that direction. Has the crisis slowed or accelerated your efforts? I mean, you have a new research center, you have new packaging ideas, and then, of course, work in the vineyards. And I'm wondering what, what, how has COVID-19 affected all of these different aspects of your plan?
Yeah, I mean, we have regardless pursued our projects. So, for instance, the new packaging for Renard, which is biodegradable and far lighter and everything than the usual luxury packages they have, has been launched partially in some markets, in particular here in Paris. We've had a tremendous success. We had a very big display in Bon Marché for this launch, and it was very well received. We got a lot of press about this, so that has continued. We have continued our work on the research center, and we are continuing on our commitment to stop the usage of herbicides in Champagne, in our vineyards in Champagne by the end of the year. So no change, I would say, almost. I mean, it hasn't. In a way, it has not accelerated and it hasn't slowed down our efforts. But what I would say is that even though the COVID crisis is definitely unrelated to any ecological concern or development and all that, there is somehow a link there. The link is about the fact that we are in a world which is less safe maybe than we like to think, that big things can happen out of the blue, and out of the blue came COVID, but the effects of global warming, we just don't know yet what it will be in details. We know it in a big picture. We know we have analysis telling us what's going to happen in 20, 30 years from now if we continue like now with our carbon emissions and with destroying biodiversity and all that. We know it. We know more or less, but there will be things happening nobody has predicted, or at least not at that time, because the timeliness of these happenings will be unpredictable, as COVID has been unpredictable. So what I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to get out of this is that we have to be ever more careful about the environment. This is, if anything, a lesson of how a situation can get out of control and how it can be too late to react. And so if anything, this has to encourage us to continue in the direction we have chosen, and to do it with the highest, the other thing which we have learned from COVID is there has been people who have acted in a very rational way in COVID, and there have people who have been acting in an irrational way. And guess what? Rationality has won. And in sustainable development, it's the same. We have to be rational. This is not about logos. This is not about certifications. This is not about labels. This is about, in every terroir, with every climate, to look at what you can do to improve your ecological footprint. And that can be the reduction of water usage in one area of the world. It can be the elevation of biodiversity in another area of the world, or combination of those. It can be definitely everywhere reduction of carbon emissions. It can be any of this. I mean, it's about packaging, it's about transport, it's about all these things, but really doing it in the smartest way, because you have that much money to spend for sustainability. How do you get the most for your bucks? By making the right choices of doing the things where your impact is the highest. And when you have a global winemaking and spirit making organization like we have, you have a lot of options, and you have a lot of people who bring you ideas, and some of these ideas are nice to have, and some of these ideas are really material in their impact. And what I'm struggling with, or not struggling with, what keeps me up at night is how to best do that job, to make sure that we get the best out of what we do.
Well, that is a perfect segue into asking you what sustainability initiatives that we're going to see next from Moet Hennessy. I mean, you're having all these ideas being funneled to you by people all over the world who work for Moet Hennessy. And so what do you see as the next steps for Moet Hennessy in terms of sustainability?
Well, we are working on all these axes, and we just had our internal annual meeting on sustainability, our forum on this, and out of that comes a new version of our internal green book. And we have, I think, 5 programs we're going to put in place. One is about water management. One is about biodiversity. So it's the themes I mentioned, and it's about, now we are going to, the next few months, it's going to be about putting money behind these activities, meaning as we budget for next year, understand how much can we afford, should we afford to put behind each activity, and what is the benefit we expect from it. So if I'm putting money behind a drop irrigation in a part of the world, so what is the impact in terms of less water consumption? Or if we put money about biodiversity increase, how many hectares of really biodiverse area are we going to create for that money? So it's a lot about that, and I must say we're at the beginning of this, and we are only realizing now what the opportunities are. I mean, we have a lot of land at Moet Hennessy, which, you know, when you have a winery, typically you have that many hectares of vineyards, and then you have a lot of hectares of land on the sides which you don't use. Maybe you don't have plantation rights, or maybe they are not adapted, or maybe they are just there and you don't care about them. Well, and one of the things I have asked you, I say, well, let's have a look at this. Can we use this land to do something useful, like growing more trees or more biodiversity or whatever, which elevates our contribution plan. So it's an ongoing process. We are going to, you know, the way I want to run this is that on one hand, we have an internal forum, which I'm going to have now twice a year, in which we look at all the opportunities and the progress on what we have done, and where we try to define the priorities and allocate the fund. We look at our own research and where we go from there. And then we want to have a forum a little bit as a successor of the forum we did at Vinexpo, and we want to call this the World Living Soils Forum. So it's a kind of university, if you want, where we want to confront our ideas with the ideas of experts from outside Moet Hennessy. So people like yourselves and colleagues and university experts, so that we always confront our way of looking at the world at other people's way of looking at the world, and never fall in the trap of becoming ideological about something, or short-sighted, or one-sided, because these topics are very complex. And so my objective here is to make sure that on one hand we have our own our own game plan, and we work on it, and we try to commit to what we commit to what we can deliver, and we deliver to what we committed to, and so always keep the realism and the ambition very well balanced. And then have moments where we go out and talk to specialists, talk to the press as well, talk to others, to share with the outside world what we've done, share it, but also share it with our competitors, with our colleagues and others, because in the end, this is not a game of competition. I mean, I'm not happy if my By the Glass program is taken over by a competitor in a very nice restaurant. Then I'm not happy, but I'm very happy if a competitor copies a good solution we found, which helps to reduce chemical inputs in the winemaking. And I'm happy to copy somebody else's solution, because in the end, we share that one planet. I don't want to share that one restaurant, but I want to share that one planet, and make sure that we all progress together. And that's why we need this World Living Soils Forum. We're still playing right now with the format. But we want to get there. And then the last point I would like to make is that for the first time, we have a Chief Sustainability Officer at Moet Hennessy. It's Sandrine Sommer. She came from Guerlain, where she was very much involved in this whole project around bee protection. And so she joined us in March, and she's going to be running this and be my voice in this world of sustainable development, and help me define the strategy and make sure we implement it.
One last question. That's really fascinating. And I'm just one last question. You know, taking a broader look at environmental sustainability in the future, um, you know, you've talked a little bit about going outside Moët Hennessy to perhaps partner with other entities, other people, to be inclusive about pulling in and joining various partnerships. What other kinds of partnerships are you actually looking at with other companies that might allow you or allow for a sort of speed up of environmental progress in terms of sustainability?
Well, the first thing I would be, we are open armed with anybody who shares our values, whatever that company does. We are very open armed to partner on this topic of sustainable development, because we believe we can only be better by having good associations, and that's also true for anybody on this call. If there's something, some ways of partnering, we'll really look into this. Now, what have we done beyond that? For instance, we've partnered with companies who produce automatic, robotized tractors to be able, because when we talk about getting rid of herbicides, of course, we still have to de-herbify our vineyards, so it's done mechanically. And so we have teamed up with a company which develops these robot tractors to find ways to improve them, to make them electrical as well, so that we do not they work with batteries and not with electricity, and by working with them, we help them develop their products. Or we have been teaming up with air recognition companies. We had a couple of them present at VinExpo as guests on our stand, visual recognition companies who have tools to do a kind of screening of your land, to understand how do you optimize usage of water and of fertilizer and other things on your land, so that you balance out where you need more and where you need less, and so that you reduce your consumption, and better understand what is below the land, what is below the earth, etc. So there's a lot of these partnerships. Very often they are startup companies, and we give them a platform where they can present their products and their tools, their solutions, and of course, and we try to test them and use them in our experiments. So.
Well, I think I'm looking at the time here. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask their questions. So Philippe, it's been great to talk with you. And I am going to turn it over to Nicole, who is going to handle the questions, of which I'm sure there are quite a number. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. I do have a number of questions that have come in. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to try to combine some of them. So we have a few that are to do with carbon intense activity. There are some surveys that are telling us that we don't want to go back to this pre-COVID life with this very intense levels of carbon activity. And as we design that future post-COVID vision, I know that in our universe, it's affecting everyone, but in our universe, there is a big question about the rise of small bottles and an increase in the packaging and carbon footprint. So if LVMH or MH and other wineries respond to that demand, should we be working on a plan to offset the impact of that carbon imprint on our our sustainability plans? Like, is there something that we should be all doing together, or is there something that you are doing in particular, or is this something that you would be taking to the World Living Soils Forum?
I mean, this is a very good question. I have to take it with me. I don't have a good answer to it. I see the point you are making. I mean, obviously, if you go for smaller bottles on a proportionate base, I would assume that the carbon footprint would be less attractive. And I think that is a very good point. I don't know what the answer is to this. What we know is that we have been redesigning some of our bottles to be less heavy, so have less glass, which improves the carbon footprint. This is unfortunately not possible when it comes to sparkling wine because of the pressure. You have 5 bars of pressure in champagne bottles, so if you make the bottle lighter, you make it also more fragile. And the other thing we have been looking at is alternative packagings, which are not made of glass. And that's, of course, not an easy one, because you have to find a packaging which is qualitative. Of course, there are in the supermarkets a lot of examples of more carbon-friendly packagings, which are used for low-priced products. But of course, you don't want to be there. So you want to have something which tells you about luxury and about high quality and all that. But at the same time, of course, there are some solutions there which are less carbon intense. So I take it as a good question, and I take it with me. It's one to work on. I don't have the answer for it.
I guess that it's very helpful to hear you, because I think it maybe brings me to another question that is to go a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, into the reference you made to this World Living Soils Forum, because it would be so interesting to hear your vision of how, of what role that could take in practice, how it could interact. We all enjoyed so much the innovative forum that you put together in Paris, and I think it really set the stage very nicely, but we'd love to know a little bit more how you think it's going to go and what people can be doing to support you in this effort.
Look, I mean, the Vinexpo forum to me looks like it happened yesterday. Even though in between there have been these 4 bizarre months of which you have known altogether. Look, I'm open to all ideas and suggestions. Right now, we felt that the forum went very well, and that it was a good format, and it was open. We felt that people could speak freely. It was creative. It was open-minded. It was not conflictual. I thought that the people who intervened, who asked questions and all that, were truly interested by the topic. They were benevolent in their questions. So I thought that maybe the biggest success is that we succeeded to create a climate of exchange, which was forward-looking and positive. And right now, the best I can imagine is to continue this and make sure we keep this climate, that we become a little bit more precise on some of the topics we are addressing. But I don't see that we reinvent it completely, unless somebody comes up with a brilliant idea, and we're always happy to follow brilliant ideas. But I thought that format went pretty well, I must say, and my tendency would be for the next version of it not to diverge too much from the original format.
That's very interesting, because of the work that came out in some of the roundtables this morning on sustainability, for example. Recognition that there is a need for those of us who are very active in this area to have a forum or a place where we can consolidate all our ideas and help each other, and not everybody try to sort this out on their individual basis. It will be too difficult, and it will take too long, and it will disperse a lot of energy that could be used towards collaborating to bigger solutions.
Yeah, I mean, if we can be part of a solution for that question, I mean, that's exactly where we want to be. Provide a place for consolidation is a very nice way of saying it, because different people find different solutions, and it's nobody has found the perfect solution yet. And I think we should all be humble about this. So I think it's very well. I mean, I will take this down and share it with the team. But the place for consolidating everything which was found out is a very nice word for describing what we could do.
Well, this idea of collaboration that leads to this consolidation, I think, is a perfect lead into some questions about inclusiveness and this tension between making luxury things which historically have been exclusive, but making sure that we are having an inclusive approach to them so that people feel comfortable approaching these products and feeling that they are accessible to them as well, no matter their economic or social background. So I know there's discussions about this in the roundtables, but it would be very interesting for you to share some of your thoughts or initiatives in this area.
Well, this is a big topic again. I mean, of course, we talk right now a lot about diversity and inclusion these days. I mean, actually, due to the recent highlights in the recent happenings throughout the world, and particularly in the US, but more than that, because of a real need, we all feel to be more inclusive and have more diversity. First of all, within our companies, and as we speak, we are working on a very strong program to elevate our level of diversity and inclusiveness. I mean, LVMH certainly has been very diverse and inclusive, both internally and externally. High proportion of women in leadership positions, high proportion of high diversity of nationalities, races, sexual orientations, etc., etc. But we can do better. And then when it comes to inclusiveness for our products, and I have read a couple of articles on that, and it is actually quite interesting. It really only came up to me relatively recently that there is a problem there as well. A good question. I mean, we need to find solutions. Is it choosing particular venues to do this? I mean, the paradox is that it goes both ways. If you look at Hennessy in North America, our consumer is essentially African American and Hispanic. When you look at our champagne in Europe, it's essentially white, and so somehow we would like our Hennessy to be more broadly shared, and we would also like our wines and champagnes to be more broadly shared. Good question. Again, I take this up as an interesting topic to work on. Huh?
Well, it's also, I think, a good segue into a couple of questions that have come in, and again, that I'm going to perhaps combine. So there is a question here about the difference between wine and spirits in the situations that we've just been through, consumption, capacity to adapt, and also on the subject of sustainability, the organic, biodynamic produced products. Do you feel that there's an increase in demand there? So it's the same question from both angles, which is the sort of where do we go from here? Is there pressure from the demand side to increase or the offer on organic and biodynamic things? And then have you seen a difference over the last period in terms of the wine and spirits, wine versus spirits in capacity, in consumption, or in demand for these kinds of products?
I mean, I think the COVID crisis itself, which is still ongoing, it's very difficult to see this and to see, is there any change there? Is it happening or not? And then even more difficult maybe is to say, well, what's going to happen afterwards? I mean, to some degree we're living, if you think about France right now, we're living in the after, post-COVID. up to the moment where there's the next phase coming in, and then we'll be back into COVID. So it's very difficult to predict. So what I would say is that beyond the fact we talked about, I mean, what drives the consumption of bio and biodynamic products? I would assume, on one hand, is a sincere desire of the consumer to contribute to a more sustainable viticulture or sustainable planet, and these labels bring that promise. Now we can discuss whether the promise is right or not. We can discuss about the usage of copper in fighting against mildew in bio or biodynamic. That this can be discussed, but that's not the point here. The point is it bears that promise. And your question was more of a commercial question, and so I would assume that since it bears that promise, it will rather be seeing a positive trend in demand. The other aspect is it bears another promise. It bears the promise that it might be healthier. And again, it's very debatable whether that's true. And I'm not going to get into that debate. But the promise is definitely there, or the understanding or the misunderstanding, whatever it is there. The consumer, to a large degree, will think that it's healthier to have a bio or an organic or a product than a non-organic product. And I think this is definitely going to be a trend in the sense that the consumer is looking for living in a more healthy way. But then you could add other aspects to that. A third aspect would be less sugar and less alcohol, which is, you could add as a kind of third pillar to this and say, well, this is also going to be visible. We have seen how people who are obese are much more threatened by the COVID than people who are not, and things like that, or how a general health situation protects you to some degree from something like the COVID virus or not. I would think that these trends, if anything, are just going to reinforce. Now, our role as an industry is, of course, we have a marketing role, and so it's normal that we will work on these trends and where it makes sense, benefit from them. And then our role is also to have a very transparent and clear and honest language towards our consumers, and make sure that we in the end, we do what is right for the long term and what is right for the sustainability of our business. And you know, when I can be at the same time sustainable and commercially astute by using a label, then I will of course do it. And I will never blame anybody for doing it. If, however, following the label or using a label is contradictory to, or you have to choose between either the label or the protection of my soils and protection of my environment, then I would privilege the protection of the environment, because that's more longer lasting. So if I have that choice, I will make that decision, and that's a personal choice.
Well, again, this vision that you've started to show us about your priorities and what you think has to be the next phase in this process is perfect for our last question, which is an opportunity perhaps for you to mention either things that are important to you about that vision that haven't come up yet, maybe about your commitment to this Living Soils Institute and how you're possibly putting some of your strategic vision into there, or you know, even if separately you have some big ideas that you want to be part of your legacy in your time at Moet Hennessy, supporting your sustainability initiatives, or other things that are important to you. We'd love to hear them.
Well, I think I have said it to a large degree. I mean, maybe what I can add to what I said is that Moet Hennessy is a big company, is a successful company, yet we don't have all the solutions. And also, we are not the bearer of the unique truths. There are, I'm sure on this call, people who are far more expert than I am on this, and have very clear views on aspects which go further than what our views are. And I think what we can bring to this community, if I can call it like that, a community, is we can bring a platform, we can bring some means by organizing a forum like the one we organize at WinExpo. So we can bring the means, we can organize a forum, we can run it, moderate it, but also let other people come in. We can run it with contrarian views, and we are not going to progress as an industry if we do not accept contrarian views, because it's not a one size fits all solution. We all need to find the next steps, and I think that's what we can contribute as Moet Hennessy, and do it in a spirit of openness, of sharing, of integrity, and with elegance.
Well, humility, openness, and integrity are fantastic concepts to finish with, and a perfect dovetailing with what we hope is the underlining value of the whole Fine Minds for Fine Wines and ARENI community. So we're so happy that our visions are so aligned, and we look forward in the next few days to building on these big ideas with your colleagues and with everyone who's on this call. So please thank me, everyone. Join me, everyone, in thanking Mr. Schaus and Ellen for this very wonderful and interesting conversation, because if the leaders in our field are thinking about these things and putting resources towards them, that gives hope to all the smaller players as well, that we're not alone in thinking about these things. So it's very reassuring, and it's very encouraging to all of us. So thank you so much, Ellen, for your fantastic questions, and thank you so much, Mr. Schaus, for your fantastic answers.